can make it there. I'll make it anywhere. It's up to you, New York, New York.
Good morning, everyone. How we doing? It's the Richie Hicks Jr. Sports Podcast. I am your host, Richie, riding solo today on this beautiful Thursday morning. Hope everybody's doing well out there. Episode is titled A New York Minute or Two. I'm going to drop in some details about what's happening with my four favorite teams in the four majors. And I want to get started with my heroes of the hardwood, the New York Knicks. Jalen Brunson coming up big last night in a 110-105 victory against the lowly, and I love saying that, the lowly Philadelphia 76ers. Karl Anthony Towns missing his first action in quite some time, but he is nursing a knee injury. The significance and the longevity of this knee injury is not the easiest thing to decipher, but I will say this. It is imperative that Mitchell Robinson returns to the Knicks as soon as possible, as they definitely need another big body if Karl's going to miss any substantial time. A positive note on this is that he was warming up. And the fact that he was warming up and the Knicks ultimately decided to not give him the go would lead me to believe that he's not that far. But, you know, my ultimate concern in the big picture is this is a huge asset, 9-year veteran in the league, and you do not want to take a chance of losing him and, him not being right for the playoffs. Last year on a different Knicks team, Julius Randle was injured, and that was a significant loss in the playoffs as many bodies were dropping for the Knicks last year. Randle obviously is no longer a part of the Knicks. He was part of the Towns trade. But it is imperative that Karl Anthony Towns is healthy for the playoffs. He's having a phenomenal season, and in my opinion, should be an MVP candidate. I don't think he'll win the MVP. I don't think he should win the MVP, but he should at least be in the conversation. Jalen Brunson doing what he does, especially when he doesn't have all the help. Stepping up big, just making some huge dagger shots to put the 76ers down. And I do want to bring some attention to the 76ers. I really don't understand the organization's philosophy or where they're going. I believe that it is a no-brainer that you have to completely shut down Joel Embiid, given that he's obviously choosing not to retire. You're 12th in the conference. There's really no bright spot of this season. Shut him down because you don't want to lose draft position, I should say. You don't want to lose that if you're Philadelphia. I, of course, am not a lover of any Philadelphia teams, but just speaking from the, unbiased side, shut this man down. And I'll be honest, if I'm in Embiid's camp, I know he's a competitor. I know he loves the game of basketball, but I think retirement needs to be in consideration. It's sad when you see great, talented players that just can't stay healthy. But sadly, in Joel Embiid's case, that has been a huge part of his career, the injuries. And, an interesting question that came up over my socials, and it was, headlined with one of my all-time favorite players, Penny Hardaway. Which NBA player would you want to have a redo of their career? And that was actually very easy for me to come up with. It's Bernard King. Slightly before my time because I really started watching the NBA towards the end of Bernard King's career. But the point is, when I see Patrick Ewing in the 90s, he had good players around him, defensive-oriented players. But the God's honest truth is, Ewing never really had that other superstar until he got older, until the team got better when they added a lot of veterans that were very good, like Larry Johnson, like Latrell Sprewell, like Allen Houston, etc. But Bernard King, what he could have been, did he not essentially miss 3 seasons? I believe that in terms of shooting guards, even though he is a Hall of Famer, he would have been even higher in terms of overall relevance to the sport. I mean, Bernard King still made the Hall, but when I look at Joel Embiid and all these injuries, it just reminds me of so many other great players that sadly the injuries took them out of play for the bigger prizes and the bigger time in the league. But the Knicks definitely running into a bit of a difficult stretch. 6 of their next 7 will be played on the road, and all against quality teams, mind you. So the New York Knicks just have to weather the storm right now, and however that plays out, they are still within reach of the Boston Celtics, despite not being able to figure them out or beat them this year. But I think more importantly than that, the Knicks just need to be healthy as they try to navigate through this tough time. But Mitchell Robinson, I look forward to his return. My New York Rangers have quietly won 4 of the last 6 games. This, of course, going back to before the break, and are within 2 points of the final wildcard spot. But the Rangers are waiting too long to bring up talent, that young talent. That is a question. Brennan Othmann could be a breath of fresh air. I want to start with the young man. It's unfortunate. A lot of people had him pegged to be on the Rangers earlier than he was, and then the injury, he was opted down back to Hartford. But when you look at the maturity of this young man, I think it speaks volumes to the professionalism and just the genuine desire of a lot of NHL players who are trying to make the dream of making the NHL. PK Subban definitely ruffled some feathers, pissing some people off and also getting praised by some people when comparing NHL players to NBA players. But Othmann is a great example of someone who loves the sport, who is just honored to be in the midst of the big team in the Mecca at MSG. As the Rangers go, all in all, the reason why I pitched the question about are they waiting too long to filter up younger talent is because although they are playing better lately, I sadly am not convinced that the core of this team is going to be enough to get them to the next level. I did like the JT Miller move, but ultimately it's going to come down. It's going to come down to health. It's going to come down to playing better as a team, just playing better together. But Igor Shesterkin is starting to take a little bit of a better form, looking like the Igor of old and the guy who's making such a huge contract, what you expect. But Rangers are also going to be walking into a very difficult stretch. And with every game meaning so much, a lot of people, when you look at your standings, lose sight of one thing that sometimes decides the bottom of the brackets. The teams that are vying for the final wild cards, overtime games. Because as long as you get to overtime, you are walking away with a point. And the Rangers, compared to other teams in the league, are on the lower end of overtime games. So getting to overtime is always going to get you a point. I do not know what to think. Based on the history of the NHL, particularly over the last couple of decades, the teams with the best record damn near never win. And the Rangers being a team that I know what they can be when they are clicking on all cylinders. But after coming off last year's phenomenal season, having the best record in hockey, the best record in their franchise's history, and coming up short in the ECF, sometimes I think it could be a bit of a blessing when you're sneaking in and you're kind of in playoff mode already. But I like what the Washington Capitals did. Last year they moved on from some big contracts while filtering up young talent. They were still able to make the playoffs. They got a big old schooling from the Rangers in round one, but now you look at them and they are just doing great things in the top of the division. Next up for the Rangers is the Toronto Maple Leafs. They are in first in their division. And it's not going to be easy for the Rangers to sneak in because I think the margin for error is getting smaller and smaller. But when you have a goalie like an Igor Shesterkin, you always have a chance. And when you look at that Rangers roster, it's not a question about if they have the talent. I just worry if they still have the juice, and that will be revealed. Going to move it over to spring training. My New York Yankees definitely got a little bit of a close-up of a potential future Yankee in Nolan Arenado. The St. Louis Cardinals still owe him a substantial amount of money. And while ownership has said that they do not intend on moving on from him, I'm not convinced that the right suitor that's willing to take on the big money would not change that narrative in ownership's minds. They always have to say what they have to say. But when I consider that his production hasn't been the best the last couple of years and that the Yankees are trying to be patient to see if they can get remotely something that looks like the old DJ LeMahieu, as of right now, I am okay with the Yankees kind of going along with the plan of using LeMahieu, using Cabrera, and just kind of having a bit of a makeshift at third for now. Because if DJ LeMahieu can stay on the field and get some of that confidence back, you're talking about a two-time batting champion, one in each league. And this is a player that in the not-so-distant past has been excellent for the Yankees. But the last two seasons, unfortunately, he's been hampered by injuries. I don't think it's time for DJ to throw in the towel yet, but this will be a huge telltale because if the production is not there, or if the Yankees get some other injuries where they are thinning out in the infield, they're going to have to make a move, and Arenado might ultimately be that guy. I thought it was kind of interesting what new Yankee first baseman Paul Goldschmidt said about his former club in St. Louis, saying that he doesn't think they're that far from finishing what they started. And I'm all for positivity, but I really don't know what Goldie is seeing, because when I look at that National League Central, I think the St. Louis Cardinals are the epitome of just above the Mendoza line. Way too early. I actually like the Chicago Cubs in that division this year. I really like what they have done with that roster. I'm happy that the Yankees were able to make a move, get Cody Bellinger, but the Cubs are younger. Cubs have a decent amount of pitching, and I just like the movement that they're doing over there. And in a very winnable Central Division, I don't think much of the Reds at all. The Pirates, after Paul Skeens, I don't really think that you have a viable number two option. And the Brewers, they just lost their closer. So I don't know if anybody really stands in the Cubs' way in that Central Division. But the Yankees, one thing that I'm excited about is Will Warren. I'll be honest. The Yankees have been patient with Clark Schmidt. You have that albatross of a contract with Marcus Stroman, and the Yankees need to figure out what they're going to do, if they're going to be able to find a suitor. They ultimately might have to just eat the money. But Stroman, sadly, has proven time and time again that he's just not that team guy. When recently asked about if he would pitch in the bullpen, he kind of snarled at the reporter and said, "I'm a starter." And maybe you are, but you're not that good of a starter. Because when you consider the kind of money that you're making, this shouldn't be a question if you're good enough to jump into the top five. I personally believe that his individual performance during the World Baseball Classic a couple years back definitely upped his stock. But I think it was kind of falsified because Marcus Stroman just has not been that guy. And on two different New York teams, apparently the bird is very perturbed by Marcus Stroman. I tell you, people, whenever I'm out in my Florida room, it sounds like Jurassic Park out here. We have like every bird known to man. But love the nature, love the lake view. But yeah, a lot of birds out here. Actually have some birds nesting right by my house. I'm letting them kind of generate their family thing. Love nature. But back to Stroman. But back to Marcus Stroman. The Yankees have to move on. You got Clark Schmidt, who I believe you can make an honest argument could be in a battle for the 5th spot, ultimately with Will Warren. The New York Yankees do not want to rush up Will Warren. There's a big jump from the minors into different workload when you get to the bigger league. But the Yankees have a good thing in Will Warren, and you want to cultivate that talent, and you want to take your time. I love the fact that we have 2 viable lefties now. You also brought in Cookie Carrasco, who I think could potentially be a spot starter. And I feel that best case scenario could kind of fill in the role of the famous 90s teams that Ramiro Mendoza had. Carrasco is a tough dude on and off the field, and I really do like the pickup. But Stroman's got to go. Stroman has got to go. I don't want selfish guys on my team, and Stroman is everything of that. Similarly to recent, when speaking to Aaron Judge, the media was asking him questions, and he is just such an unselfish dude. He took less money to stay with the Yanks, could have got a king's ransom from other teams. It meant more to him to stay in the Bronx. But then you get a guy like a Rafael Devers, who, recently acquired teammate Alex Bregman, is obviously a better option defensively at third base. And Devers, similar to Stroman, scoffs at the idea of being a DH. And all he wants to say is, I play third. And once again, Rafael, you own Garrett Cole, you're a great hitter, but you don't play third that well. Do what's right for the team. Do what's right for your team, pal. Is the Matthew Stafford salary-wise for the Giants to take on? Rodgers reached out to Big Blue, and I got some draft ideas for all of you. All right. Going to start this with Matthew Stafford. In my personal opinion, it's a weird move. You're talking about a guy that's going to command roughly around $50 million a year. 37 years old. Former Super Bowl champion. We know about that. But honestly, his skill set does not completely fit Brian Daboll's offense. I'm not saying it can't work. But what you're obviously going to have to do if you bring in a talent like Matthew Stafford is you're going to have to kind of change up your offense to a level. I do believe that Malik Neighbors will be very pleased with having a veteran that can get him the ball, where he's going to run crisp routes and he's going to be rewarded for it. I said this on a previous show that the Eagles were gassed on defense in the game against the Rams. And Stafford damn near brought them back from a 2-score deficit in the fourth quarter. And were it not for a false start, I personally believe the Eagles don't win the Super Bowl. And the Rams would have been in the title game. But those are the breaks. Matthew Stafford still has, I think, at least 2 years of quality football. But given his injury history, I am not totally endeared with him playing in the Northeast, colder weather, not the best on the joints. But I also understand the other side of this. The New York Giants are not exactly endeared with this draft class of quarterbacks. And Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll know that they have to do something at the quarterback position, because if they don't, they're both going to be out of a job. I have, in the not-so-distant past, mentioned Jameis Winston as a guy who I think would be the best suitable alternative, because I don't find him to be all that expensive. And that would also be predicated on if the Giants found somebody they liked in this draft. I mean, you go to Louisville and take a long shot, Jackson Dart somewhere in the middle, as is Quinn Ewers. There's another guy out of Texas that might be the ultimate prize for the Giants, but the Giants would have to really be terrible again this year. And if you add a Matthew Stafford, I don't necessarily think they will be that bad. I think they'll be right in the middle somewhere. But it will be interesting to see. And honestly, as long as the New York Giants don't part with good draft capital, I am okay with this move. Because you have to be honest, do you have anything better? They have nothing right now. Aaron Rodgers, I don't know how true this is, But there have been conflicting reports that he did reach out to the organization. I know that Aaron Rodgers brings a lot of bags, but one thing I got to say is when you consider that last year, the New York Giants were, the New York Jets were broken in terms of offensive play calling, in terms of just functionality, from Woody Johnson down to Robert Saleh, down to all of it. And Aaron Rodgers still had the kind of year he had, throwing more touchdown passes last year than Patrick Mahomes and Jaden Daniels. Patrick Mahomes made the Super Bowl. Jaden Daniels, offensive rookie of the year. So Aaron Rodgers still has some juice left. I am not sure if the Minnesota Vikings will take a chance on him. I am also not sure if the Rams might go that route, assuming they move on from Stafford. But I will say this, if the market dries up, Aaron Rodgers is an option for the New York Giants. Not the one that I wanted, not the one that I cooked up. But I mean, it makes sense for him. He doesn't have to sell his house. He just has to walk across the hallway. It will be interesting. A lot of mocks recently keep showing Travis Hunter to the Giants, and I will be fine with that because you could basically take care of two needs. Wide receiver opposite of Malik Neighbors, and also just for certain packages, and an old-world cornerback. It isn't one in the same with that player. Do you trade back? Do you trade to 7? Do you trade to 8? Do you trade to 6? Try to get more capital. New York Giants have some serious decisions to make. And I'll be honest, they can ill afford to make the wrong ones because it can back them up another 5 years. I hope you enjoyed this New York Minute or Two. I am Richie. Have a great day.